And we're back after a brief break. You're watching South Texas Crossfire right here on KTMV, Lopez Broadcasting, and we're also going to broadcast it on YouTube, Twitter, and also share this on the print media. So we're back after a break. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the proposed closure of Spahn Memorial and what that would mean. With me, joining me again, is Commissioner Joe A. Gonzalez here in Nueces County. Thank you for joining us. And I have the distinct pleasure of bringing on Johnny Hipp. How are you?
Nice to be here.
Well, let's clarify things first of all. Who do you represent and why are you here? That's a tough question, I know, or two tough questions.
I am employed by the Nueces County Hospital District as the administrator and CEO. I worked for the hospital district for the last 17 years, and I'm representing the hospital district here today.
So you are the Larry Mahan of healthcare because it's a pin that you dance on, the needle or the bronco you ride, because you've got to look at fiscal responsibility, taking care of the indigent, but also you have to deal with Spahn 2 on a daily basis and look at budgetary issues. Isn't that correct?
I'm a landlord part of the day and run an indigent care program part of the day, and I often describe my job as working at the intersection of medicine, money, and politics.
And it's a tough job, and we all know that, you're a smart guy, modest, but it takes a lot of intelligence, a lot of grit to be in there. So let's start out with you about this proposed closure. Let's talk about the infrastructure of Memorial. And, as the commissioner told me, the building is getting old. The building is there. If you tear down the walls, what do you see?
Well, let's kind of back up, Joe. There's actually two buildings there. There was one, the original West building was the original Memorial Hospital was built in the midst of World War II in the 1940s. The second building we refer to as the East building was built in the early 1960s. When you go through the buildings, they look real good. The improvements and renovations that have been done there over the years have left it looking in very good shape. Now, today, if you were to lift the ceiling tile or happen to see a hole poked in the wall or go in the basement or do some floor work or whatever, you will quickly be reminded that the infrastructure of the hospital, its heating, ventilation, plumbing, electrical systems, have not been renovated. They can't be renovated without taking the hospital down. So what we're looking at today is you have a very nice looking and modern looking hospital at the outset, but when you get into the things that support the hospital on a day-to-day basis, all those systems, they are very much were built and look like they were built in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And they're not built to last forever, and that has caused some issues along the way that have been taken care of, but that building is, like I said, is not designed to be out there forever. And those buildings, we estimate now, have somewhere around 10 years of useful life left in them. About 80% of the systems are near the end of their useful life.
Well, and let's take an example. Zooming back, Emory University, in Georgia, close the trauma center there around Atlanta and everything. Which had a lot of problems. And you zoom back and they say, the powers that be over there said, we need to not tear it down, but build it up. Would that argument hold here where we'd say, let's rebuild 50% of the hospital there on the site, and would that save more money than tearing down the whole thing?
Well, Joe, here's what it comes down to is when you have a problem in dated infrastructure in the building, you essentially have to fix the hospital from the inside out, so to say. So in the case of Memorial, you would literally have to take the hospital offline for up to 2.5 years because you can't shut down the heating, ventilation system, and the electrical systems and the plumbing systems in one wing and not another one. You have to fix them all at the same time in a hospital. And hospitals are not like building a house. They have redundant systems in them. They have redundant oxygen system, redundant electrical systems. They have all kind of life support systems built into them. And so when you try to repair parts of them while leaving parts of them down, it just won't work. So when you talk to the architects and engineers about the fact that you have the insides of the building are built in the 1950s and you want to go about fixing them, then they will say to you, you have to take it offline, you have to fix it from the inside out. And then they go on to say is that when you start to do it that way, you get yourself into more cost than you would be if you took the hospital down and rebuilt it.
And looking at this from a very fundamental healthcare delivery level, this and many people have told me online that this would disparately affect minorities, the poor, people living around the west side. If we move it downtown, as Judge Shamsi had said at the break, wouldn't that delay care perhaps 3 or 4 minutes, that golden hour? Trauma services, psych services, having all that and shifting it towards the water. Also, from a practical standpoint, you have less land to deal with. How would you respond to those concerns that people are bringing up online, calling me on the phone, calling the commissioner about? How would you respond to those?
But Joe, those are very important questions, and I want to signal to folks that we've taken a look at a lot of those things. And when we learned, probably it's been about 1.5 years now, what the actual useful life of the building was, what the estimated cost would be to take care of that, we began to think through how much would it cost to replace Memorial, how would that money be raised. The hospital district can only raise money in 2 ways. It can either have the commissioners ask the voters to approve a bond, or they can issue certificates of obligation. So when you sit down and you start thinking in that direction, then you have to do some projection of what the cost would be. So to build a new hospital, it costs about $2 million a bed. It's a lot of cost, it's a lot of money.
Is that million or billion?
Million with an M.
Million with an M.
So
Okay.
if you think through that you want to have a 200-bed hospital, it'd be smaller than Memorial, but more than what they have patients in the hospital right now. You're talking about a $400 million bond issue. Now that would be what the bond issue would be for. But what the voters would actually have to pay back by the time you add principal and interest to that, they would have to actually pay back about $688 million.
Are we saying here, Judge Shamsi, go ahead.
But over what period of, how many years?
25 years.
Okay, 25 years, but they would own it, correct?
The taxpayer.
Taxpayers would own it, and the life of the building itself would be more than 25 years.
After
correct?
it's replaced.
Okay, but if I build a new hospital, it isn't a 25-year life.
Correct. It would probably
50,
be 50 years.
50 years, right? So, in effect, though, you will still pay for it if the taxpayers don't build it. If Spahn built it, we would still pay for it because we would buy the bed from Spahn, right? So either way, we're going to pay for it.
Well, I mean, as a healthcare consumer.
Yeah. If the decision is that the hospital district would stay in the business and stay in the business of owning a hospital, and Joe, let me kind of just stop here and explain maybe a little bit about what the hospital district's statutory duties are.
Please.
Okay. The hospital district's statutory duties are to take care of the indigent in the county. It does not have a statutory duty to own and operate a hospital. We happen to own and operate one as an incidental fact to taking care of our indigent, but we're not required to operate a hospital. Now, since the hospital district went into its agreements with Spahn in 1996, they've been our sole indigent care healthcare contractor. In other words, by that I mean is we go to Spahn, we pay them a set amount every year to take care of the indigent population, and they arrange all the care. And that's been a very good thing for us. It saved us money. It saved the taxpayers money. Our tax rate over the years has been, instead of an upward curve, it's been a downward curve. And so all of that has worked well for the hospital district. So when we come around and we say that we just go down the trail that we want to replace the hospital. Okay, so we're talking about $400 million, but the real cost is $688 million. So the next conversation we have is our just discussions with the Commissioner's Court. What's the atmosphere for bond issues? The Commissioner's Court signals to us that they really believe there's a huge bond, that it may have other effects in the community if we have to issue a bond for that size. And they say, Johnny, can you figure out what services are important to the community, to the indigent care program, so that we can still take care of what's essential to the community, but not have to have a bond issue that end up costing $668.
So let me stop.
Million.
Let me
But let me go ahead and finish. The 4 things that were identified that as a result of that is that if we could move the services that were at Memorial, that would be the Level 2 Trauma Center, the indigent care program, psychiatric services, and the medical residency training programs. If we could move those from Memorial, because they're unique to Memorial, but they're also 4 services that are important to the community, if we could work out something where those services would be provided at Shoreline and still have those 4 important services provided, the most important two, I guess, being the trauma center and the indigent care program, if we can get those provided at Shoreline and save the cost of having to have the taxpayers over 25 years pay back $688 million, that's what they would see as a success. And so that was what we were sort of told.
But again, who's going to foot that cost? Are you saying Spawn is going to foot that cost entirely, or is the taxpayer going to pay for it directly?
If the buildings were placed on the Memorial campus, probably the taxpayer would be the one that would be expected to pay for it, because our lease ends in about 13 years. Spawn is not going to make an investment in property that they won't own at the end.
But my question being, if Spawn does it, we do it door number 2, and Spawn builds over there at their campus, will the taxpayer pay anything?
No.
At all?
They would. They're going to rent the bed. That's part of the capital. That's part of the.
What do you mean by rent the bed?
Well, you're a renter. Then you're a tenant, right? It's going to be part of their capital. They're going to recoup their money. They're not going to just let us get all that investment in capital for free.
But sure, but you're going to get a value out of it as a consumer, not as a taxpayer, correct?
You'll get it out of the other side too.
How?
Well, if you own it, you're paying them to provide the service, which means the operational part,
Right.
like the infrastructure. You provided the infrastructure. You provided the house. They care for the house. What they're saying is that we'll own the house and we'll provide the service. We're still going to pay for it.
But then wouldn't it put them in a way they're in the driver's seat, and then you can't complain about services that aren't or are given?
I don't know how the contract will read in its finality.
What do you think? What would you predict?
Joe, we have 13 years left on our current indigent care agreement. If this thing does go through, we're probably going to extend that indigent care agreement. The pricing in the indigent care agreement is not based on what the care is provided. We basically pay them a per diem or a per monthly amount every month. So if our enrollment is 8,000 today and it's 12,000 next month, we don't pay any more. And so what they use that money to care for the indigent and arrange all the services that are required for that. So in terms of the 4 services, Joe, I think what the commissioners and Commissioner Gonzalez probably could talk about this more, but they're not interested in passing a large bond issue, and so if they can get those essential services, and remember, there are only statutory duties to take care of the indigent, but they've added 3 other things that they said that they believe were important.
Which are psych trauma?
There's psych trauma and the residency programs.
Which are vital.
They're all important to the community. Now, there could be a 5th thing, there could be a 6th thing that eventually get added. When we originally started, there were 3 things, but now there are 4.
Yeah.
So whatever those 4 things can be done over at Memorial, and done over at Shoreline, and the taxpayers avoid a $688 million bond issue, that's a good thing. Now, the other thing that Spawns has agreed to do, and we don't have anything signed, but in negotiations they've agreed to extend the indigent care agreement for another 10 to 15 years. They've agreed to pay for the demolition of Memorial. They've agreed to replace the indigent care clinics that are at the Memorial campus, the Hector P. Garcia clinics, with a new building, a 40,000-foot square building where the services that are run through the indigent care program will be provided there on the campus. And those clinics, Joe, that would be one of 4 already existing clinics. It would basically be a 5th freestanding clinic. And those clinics are open to all the citizens of the community, not just the people in the indigent care program. So if you have a Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, CHAMPAS, any of those people can go in there and get care. So the only thing, Joe, I think that we have not been able to address adequately yet is the fact that Memorial has had an emergency room in that area for a long time. And folks have gotten used to an emergency room being there. So while one argument says, well, the next emergency room, if it is at Shoreline's only a mile and a half away, I think some reasonable point, some reasonable intermediate transition might be is to consider an urgent care center or something like that that's a part of the Hector P. Garcia clinic. Since there's not going to be an emergency room there, it's too expensive to duplicate the level 2 trauma center. So we try to think through as many of these things.
Can we duplicate level 2 trauma at Spawn Shoreline?
They can, and actually, Joe, that's part of the transition because as we talked about before, the level 2 trauma center is important because if you and I leave work today and we get T-boned in the intersection outside of our home or office, the ambulance or the helicopter, depending on what happens to you, is going to take you to Memorial. There's really no choice. They don't have a choice when they pick you up about where you got to go. So the level 2 trauma center is important to us. It's also important to the industry in our community. We have a lot of heavy industry here in our community and in the area. And the helicopter has a pretty big footprint in this area. It reaches out 16 counties. The trauma center is the only level 2 trauma center south of San Antonio. And the only way we can get a higher level trauma center, which would be a level 1 trauma center, is to have a medical school next door to the hospital. And we don't have one of those, so we have the next best. And Spawn actually took, when we leased the hospital to them in 1996, we only had a level 3 trauma center. They invested a lot of money, time, and services in bringing that program up to a level 2. And so essentially, Joe, we have the highest level trauma center in our area that we can have without having the benefit of a medical school. So those level 2 services are important to the community. They're important to industry. And so if it wasn't here and you had a serious accident required care, you would probably be stabilized here and immediately airlifted to San Antonio or Houston.
Is that what's happening? The burn unit that we used to have, that we had now, you've got a 16,000 minimum Halo flight ride to BAMC. And isn't it true that the burn and a lot of services have been closed down for Memorial?
Joe, that's what I understand. And some of these questions I have to defer to Spawn, but just my anecdotal information, from what I understand.
For the record, we sent out a golden invitation to them and we didn't hear back.
My anecdotal information has that when you have a burn center, there's a whole level of specialists and stuff that you have to have, and one of the level of specialists is plastic surgery. And what Spawn has said is that they could not arrange a physician contract for any physicians to cover the burn unit at Memorial. Other services and stuff there. So I think, Joe, what they're doing is kind of like you said, is they bring them into the emergency room, they get them stabilized so they can sustain a ride to the burn unit at Fort Sam Houston, and they airlift them to San Antonio.
One of the last things, and this question to you, also in your experience and what you've seen, you brought up an interesting point that, again, I have grave concerns, and so do a lot of people that brought it up, that 3-4 minutes matters when you're having a heart attack, a stroke, and you're on the west side, lead it downtown. What's the issue on your mind that you were going to bring up following that up?
I was going to say that if you're going to locate the new facility, I think the data of where the trauma originates, where do you catch most of your calls, will help drive where maybe the market should be located, where the hospital should be located. Because it makes no sense to put the hospital at the furthest part of the county. It just makes no sense that you have, if all your traffic is coming from the west side or in that general area, it makes no sense to extend the ride further to the downtown area. And so I would think that you would do a case study to figure out historically in the last 10 years, where did most of the calls originate from? And maybe if you don't want to build on the Memorial land, then why can't they purchase land somewhere away from shoreline in a more centrally located area that could service the people better?
Well, I wish Spawn would come on and answer those questions.
Well, the issue is because they own the land here. And in honesty, they're going to get a huge financial bump to the surrounding real estate, the surrounding business potentials that they have by relocating everything to shoreline. I mean, well, that's in essence.
Commissioner, thank you for being so patient. I know we've been talking about this. You've been listening to this. Your constituents run from the south side all the way to the colonias. How does this impact? And I know that you're in a position here where you're saying, do we make a bond issue or do we let Spawn run with it? So, for those people out there who are saying, well, the commissioner's just going to be voting for Spawn. You're not voting for Spawn, but you're voting for not raising taxes or bonds.
Well, that's the question that I always tell people when they ask me. I said, "Are you ready to pay $100 more in taxes?" And they said, "We don't want no taxes."
Well,
so
and
how do we do it then? We have two options here: either Spawn does it, or we're doing a bond, through a bond election. And we do that, it's going to be taxes. Delmore right now, they cut back on their bond, and still we're going to have to. If it passes, we're going to pay $25. For Delmore more.
But over what, 25 years?
For 25 years. But right now people don't. Last year when we went the effective rate tax and it went up $20, everybody complained about it.
But doesn't this affect your precinct where you have people that are poor, people that are minority, people that are indigent?
But
people in the rural areas.
A night to me, It depends where the accidents happens all over the world. I mean, it happens all over the place.
All over the
It
county,
doesn't always
sure.
happen on the west side. I mean, the accidents happen in SPID, Padre Island, everywhere. So it depends where you're coming from. I mean, it could be that from Padre Island to Spawn will be shorter than coming from the Colonias to Spawn. You don't know.
It's a good argument.
The thing is, I guarantee you now that if it's a bond deal, it's not going to pass in the commissioner's court. The commissioner's court is not going to sit there and say, we're going to go for a bond election.
And why is that?
Because it's raising the taxes. And I guarantee you right now,
People will be up in arms about the taxes.
they were up in arms last year when the tax rate, went up a little bit, and just think of how much is going to go up with the bond election.
Well,
Judge?
that decision doesn't have to be made today.
Yeah, in other words, what time frame are we looking at? People are panicking because they're saying they're picturing Memorial being a sledgehammer and a wrecking ball happening tomorrow. Mr. Hipp, what time frame are we looking at that's proposed by Spawn?
Joe, in our discussion so far with Spawn, and I think they've also had a timeline that they've used in their public meetings so far, and it'll probably be that way on the one on Monday, is basically it's a process that starts next year and ends 5 years down the road.
Okay, so this is not going to happen.
No, the decision is made at 6 months. That's what he's saying.
Okay, but the application of that decision and the ramifications of it aren't going to be finished until 2019?
Correct. And so what Spawn, you have to look at the timeline, but Judge Shamsey's right that you do have to pay attention to the timing, and there is some push to try to move this thing quickly so they can get started. But basically they start by erecting the Hector P. Garcia replacement clinic at Memorial, and it would be located more or less where the helipad, if anyone's familiar with Memorial campus now, where that's located now. And then the last thing, there's a lot of things in between that first step and the last one. The last step is actually to demolish Memorial, but there's a lot of things that happen in between. Most of the things are the things that will be happening at Shoreline. They're going to have to do the work to bring the trauma center to Shoreline. And I wanted to say, Joe, that the trauma center, it's not one of those kind of things where you can send in an address change form and the trauma center mysteriously or paperwork-wise moves from Memorial over to Shoreline.
It's a big deal.
They will actually have to start a second level 2 trauma center at Memorial, bring it up and have it online for up to 2 years, get it certified as a level 2 trauma center before they can take the other level 2 trauma center down. And that's part of the stipulation we've had with them in our discussion, that at no time did the community go without the services of a level 2 trauma center. So they are going to actually have to literally run 2, at least for a short time together. The public will benefit from that, but it has to do with the way the regulations work. And so they have to do the infrastructure that's necessary at Shoreline to bring the trauma center over there and set it up. And there's a lot of stuff that has to go along with that. They're going to have to merge 2 large emergency rooms. They have a big emergency room at Memorial, they have a big emergency room at Shoreline. They have to bring those together. Now the Memorial emergency room is used to dealing with major trauma patients. And so that's something that they're going to have to ingrain into themselves at Shoreline and be able to do those.
It's a different work culture.
It is, and I think one of your earlier guests may have said that. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen. The main thing is to get the trauma center set up over there. I think when you look at their drawings, and I know they say they're conceptual, but the old part of the Shoreline campus comes down. The new part that's there, that's corrected by the walkway, stands, and they begin to wrap buildings around that. And so a lot of the work between the first step and the last step happens at Shoreline. And the last step, and at least their timelines, I think say 2018, but time-wise probably actually going to be 2019, is when the demolition of Memorial. So by that time, Joe, Memorial would be down to about 5 or 4 years of useful life. We could get a little more out of it, could be a little less, but at that point we start getting to where decisions have to be made about Memorial. We have to get bonds issued, we have to get architectural drawings done, we have to, a lot of stuff really has to be in motion before that. So,
nothing's going to go up, nothing's going to go down until something goes up. I mean,
Correct.
You're not going to tear anything down until you build something.
Because I know that people on the west side are going to probably assemble in front of Memorial and say, we don't want our hospital torn down.
And Johnny Hipp has done an excellent job in representing the county, the commissioner's court, the county, in making sure that those 4 things that he talked about, that provide services for the indigent, provide the trauma, the psych unit, and other
training
programs, and even the emergency room. We as the commissioner's court are concerned about those things too, and when they come to the business court to ask us for a blessing because really it's their land, it's their building. It's not the county's. The city and the county turned it over to them.
Hospital district.
So the hospital district. So
The hospital district owns it.
Owns it.
So the taxpayer doesn't.
No. Hospital district owned it, so we.
But indirectly, who puts the hospital district in power? Who appoints them?
The county, the commissioner's court.
And who votes in the county commissioners?
Well,
The voter.
yeah, but I'm saying, but the money, I'm sorry, as far as us making a decision, it's not up to us.
Who's it up to?
Up to the hospital district.
And the hospital district, for people to understand, basically is created how and empowered by whom?
It's actually a creature of the Texas Constitution. It's governed by several chapters of the Texas Health and Safety Code. Our hospital district was created by the voters in 1967. Most urban hospital districts urban counties in Texas have a hospital district. Our hospital district is governed by 7 citizens that are appointed by Commissioner's Court. It's been the practice of the hospital board since I've worked for it, even before then.
And we're talking 17 years.
17 years for anything that is particularly something of this magnitude, that the hospital district would not undertake this if it did not have the clear support of commissioners.
Now, Johnny, you're not going anywhere, right? The next 5 years, we need for you to
10
stay.
years. He's going
10.
10 years.
We
By the
need
way,
10.
My contract's up for renewal, so you can help
No,
me with that.
he needs a raise. Okay, so now look. The taxpayer is stressed out. The person from the west side, particularly the socioeconomic, if they want to contribute a question, concern, who do they turn to? They feel frustrated that we don't know who to talk to. Besides going to these meetings that maybe we can't get out to, can we email? Can we get on social text? Is there going to be more education on this on media platforms? Like, that's what I'm trying to do with this show, is try to save a person that can't or is wheelchair bound at home and can't make the meeting. We want to try to educate them a little bit, but is there an email, a number they can call?
There are, and let me just start with the commissioners. There's a web page at the Commissioners Court. On their web page, it has their contact information, their telephone, their email. As well, when you go to the hospital district's website, and that's www.nchdcc.org.
NCH.
DCC.org, like Nueces County Hospital District, Corpus Christi.org. When you go to our website, and there's immediately a phone number on the front for the district's numbers, but on the left-hand side, if you click, it's just a one-click, click Board of Managers.
Johnny Hip After Hours.
It will pop up. It'll pop up all 7 of their pictures and all their contact information.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
and
good.
For the record, just
and
for the
their
record,
email
I've
addresses.
got 2 things on it. And the Commissioner's Court has told Mr. Hip, if we don't see those 5 things in black and white, we don't have our blessing. We want those things to happen. But on record right now, I'm going to tell Mr. Hip that after going to the hearings, I really think that SPON needs to think about creating, in addition to the outpatient, creating a 24-hour urgent care center.
And I think Mr. Hip brought that up too.
Yeah, that's going to be. Well, we've been talking about this since the last, and I met with him. I said, "Well, this is a good idea."
And what about a psych hospital?
Well, psych hospital has to do with SPON. They're going to have to provide the psych. They're going to have to.
If not, the jails are going to have to do it, and
the judges
and Sheriff Kalin is not happy.
No.
And Joe, that's the 4th thing. I mean, originally that we had 3 services. The 4th one that was added about 6 months ago was psychiatric services. And
Thank you for bringing that up.
That arose from a couple of vantage points. About 2 years ago, I got a phone call from the county judge, and he says, "Johnny, I got 3 district judges sitting in my office right now, and we can't do mental commitments." And
I've been a part of those, and it is memorial. It is essential to have that, because you have parents that have somebody that has problems, and they feel that they might even get murdered in the middle of the night because they fear their own child. And
Joe, the other thing is our local MHMR center. They do a lot of mental health care. They have both inpatients and outpatients. And if there's not beds designating the community for Ms. Lawrence's group, the Diane who runs the MHMR center here, if there's not a place that they can have those patients incorporated in care here, they're going to have to put them in an unmarked police car and send them to San Antonio for care, and that doesn't make
and that's
sense.
a revolving door. We've seen that.
Yeah, and Joe, the other thing too is that one of the things that we've kind of learned as we go forward in the years that most people who have mental health concerns also have medical concerns, and in prior sort of way people thought about they treated those 2 illnesses in silos. And nowadays we've learned that when you treat mental illness, you have to treat their medical conditions and stuff too. So what we're saying by all that is that the 4th thing that we've added is that the psychiatric services have to be in adjacent to or in a medical facility, because the mental health patients practically all have medical needs and stuff that have to be addressed.
Very well said.
And then the last thing, Joe, also is that as you know, you're an attorney. Law enforcement officers in Texas have the ability that if they encounter someone and they believe that they're a danger to themselves or someone else, they, under their own lawful power, can have them admitted to a psychiatric facility for up to 72-hour evaluation. And so those things happen often in our community. They happen daily, and there have to be a place that the police officers, the law enforcement officers can take those individuals and have them in the hospital. You know, sometimes they may not stay, but the law enforcement officers have a responsibility to do what they think needs to be done. So if the patient does stay beyond or stay up to 72 hours, at that point, and you guys are lawyers more than me, but I think an officer of the court, a judge, begins to hear their case at that point, and there are other things. So we have both judicial needs for psychiatric beds, we have law enforcement needs for psychiatric beds, we have MHMR needs for psychiatric beds.
It's a big deal.
It's
a big deal. We've got a minute left before we go to break. Closing arguments, 30 seconds before break from each of you, starting with you, Commissioner.
Well, I just want to say again that, you know, we need to know from the people what you want. If you want to go for a bond, you know, let us hear it, you know, and you want a bond.
And a bond costs money.
It costs money and it'll be more taxes. But also, real quick, and then maybe Johnny and Mr. Hip can also touch on this, there's some brochures that are being passed out from SPAWN. And the Family Center is a state-of-the-art family center. To me, it's a one-stop shop. If you look at all the items, everything, all the treatments, all the programs that's going to be listed at the Family Center, I mean, there's only like 15 different things that are going to be treated. It's social services, mental health, all this, you know, outpatient, and hopefully the 24-hour urgent care center that we're going to push for. Because I think it's if we have that 24-hour center there, Joe, you know, people won't have to worry about we're taking everything away from us, you know, because
at least they can stabilize the person with chest pain, having a stroke,
and then they're going to be committed anyway.
No, but I'm talking about real life-threatening emergency plus the psych trauma. Okay, we'll still minutes matter when somebody's hemorrhaging or they have crushed bones and arteries. But I would like to see as part of that package, and I think a lot of people on the West Side, if we have that urgent care, and I think that it's going to create a vacuum where we've got to do preventative and house call medicine for our veterans and the poor also. Judge Shamsi, what do you want to tell the voters out there?
I want to tell them that they're trying to make a business decision involving a $500 million building and a 40-year, 50-year commitment relocating an industry, and we're going to do it in 6 months. Very foolish to make that decision. It takes many years of discussion. Second thing, SPAWN is not the only player.
We have HCA that could take the contract.
You make them compete for the deal. Third thing is I think you have to logistically determine where is the best place for the hospital. And without a doubt, I don't believe Shoreline is the best place. Fourth thing I'd like to know is what is the current bed capacity overall in the community? What is the vacancy? And where is the demand now and where it will be in the future? And if we tear down Memorial and build a smaller hospital on Shoreline, does SPAWN actually benefit from it or not? Regardless of which course you're going to take, the taxpayers are going to flip the bill. It's doing what's best for the taxpayer in the long run.
Well, I'm asking SPAWN to come out on TV. We've asked you to come out, the representatives from there. They need to answer these questions. Mr. Hip was good enough to come out, but for the hospital district, SPAWN needs to answer these questions and be held accountable.
Antonio Garcia Art Center is a meeting also.
And will SPAWN be there?
SPAWN will be there.
Everybody out there at Antonio Garcia. Now, when this plays, that would have been 4 days ago, but at least. But I'm going to be announcing this on YouTube. We're going to be announcing this on radio tonight. And today is the 11th right now of June. July. And so we're going to go ahead and really push for this. Antonio E. Garcia Art Center. We're going to hit that on the Facebook, and we're going to put that out there and we're going to play this again and again and again. So final words, Mr. Hip, and thank you so much for coming out. It's very much appreciated.
And what I'd just like to say in the end, just to kind of wrap up, is that down the road, whether we do anything with SPAWN or not, we're going to have a building that's at the end of its useful life. We know today that if we do 200 beds, it's going to cost, in today's dollars, the taxpayers about $688 million over time to pay for it. So we know we have that out there. So if the SPON thing falls through, then the decisions will still need to be made by the taxpayers about what we're going to do. We think that what SPON has offered us is something that's reasonable. It saves the taxpayers money because there's some other things that are in the discussions that would also save the taxpayers money. And so when the Commissioners Court signals to us that they're not willing to raise taxes, we think our options are drawn pretty short. And we think we've made some good choices if those turn out to be the options we have to deal with.
Well, and the thing is that I want to really underline is SPON gave their word. That was a contract. Now they want to change the contract. They want to tear down the hospital, and services have been shifted from Memorial to the others. So when you make that contract and you know what you sign and what you get into, you got to take the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know? And so I think that, you know, I'm concerned that what they're promising and what they can deliver may be two different things. And I'm not holding their feet to the fire because we know that Medicaid expansion, it's not up to them, and they're having to do what they have to do to survive.
The devil's always in the details, Joe.
And you are certainly the master of the details. Johnny Hip, a friend of South Texas Crossfire here, the community, he's not with SPON, he's with the hospital district. And as he said, we don't have to have the hospital, but we want to do the right thing, have indigent care. And we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have on Mary Helen Baranga and also our resident, love him, hate him, but never ignore him, Homero Villarreal, El Defensor. So thank you, gentlemen, for being on.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Johnny Hip. I'm the administrator for the Nueces County Hospital District. I'm going to talk after Mrs. Robertson does. Pam Robertson is going to share with you a lot of information about these plaques and stuff that are up here behind me. And what I'm going to do after that is to wrap around Ms. Robertson and share with you why the hospital district has an interest in the proposals that SPON has made and the ones that she'll share with you. And so at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Pam Robertson.
Transformational changes at the Memorial and Shoreline campus are expected to cost an estimated $375 million. One of the things that I want to really emphasize is that in order to give us this most amazing healthcare delivery network, we will not ask for any taxpayer dollars. And that is critical. We would start with the Dr. Hector P. Garce Family Health Center design. We would then go into the Shoreline design. We would have the construction happen first of our Dr. Hector P. Garcia Family Health Center, then the Shoreline construction. This is very deliberate because after the design, we've got to build the new homes so that there's no disruption in service. So again, we're committing to taking care of our community, all of our community, without any disruption in service. And then we would propose that the demolition of Memorial.
We would essentially have to take Memorial offline for about 2.5 years. And what I mean by offline is that we would have to close the hospital to the public. And when you talk to the architects and engineers, they tell you that in order to fix the infrastructure in the hospital, we have to basically fix it from the inside out. And so that absolutely necessitates that we close its use to the public. And the architects and engineers will also tell you that when you have to fix a building from the inside out, you're opening yourself up to a lot of unknown and uncontrollable costs. So what does it cost to fix Memorial, basically to have a replacement facility, because that's what would be needed? Essentially, it would cost $400 million in today's dollars to replace Memorial, and that's based on cost of hospitals. For those of you who are interested in this, it cost about $2 million a bed to build a hospital. So we use a number of 200 beds to come to the $400 million. The 200 beds is smaller than there is now, but it's larger than the number of patients they have every day. So the cost is there, but the real cost to the taxpayers is $688 million. While we have a bond issue possibly for $400 million, by the time you pay back the interest over the course of 25 years, the cost of the project becomes $688 million.
Very passionate about the community. You expressed your comments.
Yes.
A lot elaborate a little bit more about how important it is that Memorial stay?
You know, it has to do with the community. You know, we have to have a place to live, a place to shop. Unfortunately, some people get sick. They have to have a place to get sick and get well. And it's an integral part. And what we're doing is we're taking out from the west side and putting it someplace else. And the west side community is left in a void. And that's my passion, that they're taking things away from us, and then eventually the west side will, wither and die. We have to have families, we have to have stores, we have to, the post office is on the way of telling us they want to move. We lose Memorial, the post office. What else is there? The street people, unfortunately.
Now, you talked about how what it's inevitable. In other words, you kind of mentioned. It looks
Well,
like it's gonna happen.
you know,
What needs to happen if that does happen? What needs to happen?
what needs to happen is, I mentioned the county judge. In the newspaper, he says, I have no stomach for a bond issue. We don't want his stomach. We want his brains and we want his heart. That's what we want. Every big box people that comes in this who wants to set up a store, they cannot wait to give them tax rebates and refunds and abatements. Why? Because they create jobs. So what about us? What about the people who were here before the big box stores? And it's just manifestly unfair the way that the city, hospital district, whatever, treats a significant segment of the population and an area of Corpus Christi. We all live and love and work here.
That's right. The chaplain earlier started off, I don't know if you were here, I think you walked in after the chaplain
Yes.
said this too. He talked about compassion and how compassionate Spawn was. I see the compassion that you have. Tell me a little bit about your love for your community and how important this is to you.
It's important because we all have a reason for living. We all want to make a contribution. And when we take that away from us, it's an empty void. And we become essentially helpless and rudderless, and we have no place to go except down. And we want to be able to go up. Where is the church? Where is it's Christus Spawn. Where's the Holy Mother Church? Where are they? They're not here. And I hear they're paying millions of dollars for the renegade priests. Where is their money? Why can't they make a contribution? And essentially, this is a hospital district for all of Nueces County, not just south side, west side, east side, whatever. And they need all of the counties to come together and build it. 400 million is chump change when you figure out what's going to happen after they leave. That's my story.
So, how'd the meeting go today? What do you think?
I think it went very well. People voice their opinions and voice their concerns, and at the end of the whole, it's about the four core things that we're asking Spawn to provide to this community. One is the psych care center. One is the programs for residency, indigent care with the county, and also the Trauma 2 center. And the good thing about the Trauma Center that we don't understand is that we're not going to close Memorial, or they're not going to close Memorial until they build the other one. So it's not like you're going to tear it down tomorrow or next year. It'll be about 4 years probably, because that trauma center, the new one, is going to have to be technology. It's got to be level 2, equipment-wise and everything. And when that one's ready to go, then they think about tearing this other one down over here. So you got to figure that nothing's going to happen in a year or 2 or 3 or 4. That service will still be there. And and I know it's about everything else too. It's about jobs. It's about holding jobs for nurses, holding jobs for physicians, and that's what the residency programs are there. Now they got 2 residency programs, one for the trauma center and one for the emergency room. Hopefully we'll keep some doctors. And I think and I don't see us losing a lot of jobs. I see it getting more jobs, because you might be cutting back a hospital, but you're building a center I want to call it the Hector P. Garcia Memorial Health Center. I think it rings good. We keep the memorial in there, right? People worry about memorial we'll keep the memorial in there. After all, it got birth from memorial, right? So I think by the time that center is built, David, I think that we need to look at all the services they're going to provide. They're going to have to be manned by somebody. And if we have an outpatient, it's going to have to be manned by doctors and nurses and everybody else. I recommended today, plant the seed, that we should consider a 24-hour urgent care center, not emergency room, urgent care center for minor emergencies. So like we do one in Portland, we do it elsewhere. That should be, because, we talk about, the big thing that I hear is, we go to the emergency room, they've got you waiting for long hours, a lot of hours. You sit there and you wait for 3, 4, 5, 10 hours. Well, if we had that urgent care center, they wouldn't have to go to the emergency room. And most everybody that goes to the urgent care center, they're going to wind up going to the outpatient clinic anyway. So they're already there. So it's a referral for the next day. So I think we have to look at those things. I'm going to push hard that we'll look at the urgent care center in 24 hours. At the same time, the hospital district has done a wonderful job of monitoring the indigent care that SPON has provided, and they don't have any problems with it. Johnny Hip talked about we've gone from 15,000 indigent care to 8,000, and hopefully we'll go down to 5,000 with the Obamacare, ACA. I think it'll go down, and they're going to have a facility there that also is going to sign up people and help them process them through the ACA. So eventually, hopefully, that's going to go down. Social services, all this with cardiac, and all this with diabetes, education, so with mental health. It's going to be and people say, what's going to happen to the business? What's going to happen? Well, maybe it will be more for the business, because people are going to come in and out there every day, 7 days a week. They're going to be coming in and out of that center, and the business, I don't know who's going to flourish from it, but I think it'll be the restaurants, if there is any. As far as the value, I think it's going to be good for the value of the resident, because it's going to be a brand new center. It's not going to be like an eyesore. It's going to be a brand new center. So I think we have to look at, we got to be positive. The other thing that, you heard tonight is that people that we don't want to go after a bond election, $400 million. Well, I don't want that either, because the people have to pay for that. But if this community, David, my constitution, this community wants a bond election, then I'll support it, if they want one. But they got to convince us they want a bond election. They want to pay more taxes, which might be $100 more. Might be $50 more, maybe more. You talk about $400 million, and then by the time you do the interest, it's $468 million. That's 30 years that you're going to double your taxes. If the community wants that, we'll support it. I'll support it. I'm not talking about anybody else. I'll support it. But I know that they don't want that. I mean, they were paying $15 more last time when we do the tax rate, and they were all complaining. Most of them were complaining. And I can understand why. Money is hard. It's a crunch. So and SPON, the good thing about SPON is that they're paying for everything. No tax dollars are being spent. SPON is flipping the bill for the $358 million to do the transformation. Another $1 million. I forgot the other $25 million so they're going to spend a lot of money doing this for this community.
Let me ask you something. Seems like a lot of people here I was born there, the memories. It seems like the Memorial Coliseum all over again. Kind of.
Well, I let my appendix here too, and my mom, gave birth to one. But, memories do not provide services. Do we want memories? No building, or do you want services? What do you want? I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, we all have memories. I mean, I wonder how many of those people that have memories, they have pictures. Probably most of them don't have pictures of them, that they can go back to and look at it, right? Now, those are memories. You want to keep pictures, and you got time to take pictures all you want, But I'm just saying, let's not talk about a building that we're going to preserve because you went there. We've all been there. I lived in the Wiggins in the housing project right behind Memorial. We walked to Memorial. We had doctors at Memorial. You know, and like I said, I had my pennies taken out of Memorial. So, you know, and to me, there's memories there too. But do I want to provide, take away the services for community versus my memories? No, I would never do that. I would always say, what can we do for our community? What can we do for the citizens of this community? What kind of service can we provide? The best services, you know, that we can provide. And the best trauma center there is. And we have the best trauma center. We just need to rebuild the same trauma center. And like Johnny said, there's a law about trauma centers. You can't tear one down unless you have another one already built. So that's going to take 4 or 5 years. And the demolition of Memorial is not going to happen until maybe 3 or 4 years from now. So we know we're looking down the road, and you know, but I think that it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that can happen, and I think that once it's done, and I'm going to push with number 5 that there should be a Hector P. Garcia Memorial Health Center. I think it's got a good ring to it. We keep the name Memorial. People are happy, you know. So I don't know. You know, this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
As a commissioner, I'm going to push for it. And I want to thank the Spawn Memorial and Hospital District. And we're going to have one more hearing at the Northside over Williams. So it looks like we are. So and I want to just thank them for. But I want to thank them. I tell you what, Spawn Memorial, Hospital District have been awesome in going out to the community, providing this information, being open, transparency, and you know they know that they're going to get bombarded, you know, but they were there, and they answered just about every single question the best way they could. People might not, some of them not being happy, but they answered the questions, you know. And I want to thank the hospital district and Spawn for going out in the community and doing what they did, and we really appreciate them for doing that. I know that I, as a commissioner, I've learned a lot. And I know the other commissioners have learned a lot too. So, but I think it's a good thing.